Hello, and welcome to The Prodigal Life. I'm Deacon Harold, and joining me as always are Ellen and Nick. And we are here to help bring you to deeper intimacy with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
All right. That sounds like an exciting proposition.
It's a good way to spend
You can do that
time.
for me directly. That would be really helpful.
Exactly.
Ellen, what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about our favorite books in addition to the Bible. Like, we know the
Okay.
Bible is one, you know,
Okay.
and it's the most sold and read book in the world, if I remember right, based on statistics. But all of us have had books throughout our journeys that have meant something to us. So we thought we would share some of them with you. We'll probably take turns and, rotate and go back and forth. And we may do another episode because I don't think 3 books each is kind of sufficient, because I'm sure each of us. How many books are in your library, Deacon?
About 4,500.
See, there's that.
Just a few.
Just a few. So we're going to start. So I guess we'll have Deacon start us because Deacon is a published author. He has many books out there. And I don't know if you all have read many of them, but if you have not, please seek them out.
We should both put one of his books on our lists.
Yeah. We can do that. We'll do. Maybe we'll do it. Maybe we may do an episode on like all those different books.
Yeah,
because it would be kind of
that'd
fun.
be good. No, too bad
I
we're doing
know,
it.
but you don't have to. We can do it, and you can just sit there and tell us, yeah, that was that. But basically, what's involved? I mean, because being a Catholic author is much different than being a regular author.
So I think we're talking here about Catholic books, right?
Correct.
So we're talking about,
Catholic
we're
publishing.
talking about writings by different Catholic authors or even saints who help to help us grow spiritually, mature spiritually, develop spiritually, that have lifted us up, that have inspired us to greater sanctity, inspired us to greater virtue.
Yeah.
And for me as a writer, first of all, I never thought of myself as a writer at all. I mean, I never, ever envisioned myself writing a book, ever.
Okay.
The longest things I've written until my first book was the kind of outlines for scripts for EWTN, for the television series. Because, you have to do
You have to have
13
scripts.
episodes. And so I have to have, I just can't sit there and make it up off the top of my head. I have to have an outline and kind of how I want to move, what direction I want to move things in. And so for the first book, when I was approached about writing it, again, never thought of myself as an author. And so when we kicked around book ideas, the one that came to the fore was about male spirituality. And it was appealing to me for a couple of reasons. One, I already done an EWTN series for men. Okay. And second, I didn't see anything out there that was a developed Catholic theology of male spirituality. So there were books out there by tons of Protestant books for men.
Right.
But nothing rooted in the sacramental life in the church. Nothing rooted in the sacraments, in the Catholic faith.
Wow. So it's called?
Yes, I mean there were like John Paul II wrote he wrote Redemptoris Custos, Garner the Redeemer, on Saint Joseph, and that was the 100th anniversary of Quam Pluriis, on the first document by a pope on Saint Joseph, which was very short, by the way. And there was Familiaris Consortio on the family, where John Paul II mentioned fatherhood, but there was not a developed theology. What is the theology of male spirituality that underpins all of that? There's stuff for women, but there was nothing for men. I mean, we talked about women being the highest, for God's creation. Of course, there's stuff for women, but there wasn't anything for men. Now, there are books on pornography and virtue and that kind of thing. But there's got to be a theology underneath all that. So that's what my book does. It looks at kind of a theology of Catholic male spirituality.
What's it called?
Behold the Man, a Catholic vision of male spirituality.
Solid name.
Yeah, and so that's what I did. I kind of thought about, okay, what does it mean to be a man? What's the theology behind it? And what's called the hermeneutic, or what's called the interpretive key, or the keys to understanding my approach to the book, was John Paul II's anthropology, or in other words, his approach to the human person.
Right.
And I applied that understanding to men, and then also St. Paul's theology of the cross, were the two things I kind of married. Is kind of like the way it was in my forefront in my mind as I was writing the book.
So how long did it take to go from when they
A
asked
year.
you to? A year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first book took the longest to write. Because I'd never done anything like that before, and I wanted, just make any sense, and it's just flowing right, and all that kind of stuff, and
Right.
and it took a year, And then I've written 6. I just submitted my 6th manuscript, but I've 5 books that are published now, and it gets a little easier
Each time.
every time. Yeah, so it doesn't take as long because now I have an understanding. I understand the editing process. I understand what's going to happen with the book after I submit it and all of that. So it helps. So
Who do you publish through?
all different publishers. So each of the
okay.
5 books so far are 5 different publishers.
Oh.
The 6th book is going to be with Ignatius Press. So the first book's Ignatius Press. The second book is Franciscan Media. The third book was EWTN Publishing. The 4th book is with Perusia out of Australia. And the 5th book is Ave Maria Press.
Okay.
Yeah. So all different. And they all approached me. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to submit this book and see if they like it. I mean, like I said, I never thought of myself as an author, so I never thought about submitting anything.
Nice.
You know, but and the thing is, I write nonfiction.
Right.
So I'm not I'm not very creative when it comes to like all these ideas like of Narnia and like developing a whole language and a whole world, you know, and things like that. That's not me.
Okay.
You know, I'm more of a logical, kind of analytical thinker. You know, although I try to take the ideas and get it across in a way that's meaningful in people's lives. And I think that's the mark of any good Catholic author is to take the richness and beauty and depth of the faith and whatever subject matter they're addressing and getting it across in a meaningful way to people's lives so they can elevate their faith experience and ultimately draw them closer to God.
Yeah, beautiful.
That's awesome.
So now we know a little bit more about the publishing in the Catholic world because, you know, I really wouldn't know anything about it.
And the thing is the wide variety as well.
Oh,
I mean, there's books for Catholic moms, right? There's all kinds of books.
Tons of books on how to pray.
On practical things. Exactly.
And the Eucharist and, you know, and then of course the saint books are amazing. So they're really, really good. All right. So give us one of your favorite books.
Well, one of my favorite books is, besides the Bible, right?
Besides the Bible. We already prefaced that.
Right?
Yeah.
The Catechism, I think, is awesome. But for me, I mean, Scott Hahn, I mean, who hasn't been touched in some way by Scott Hahn?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but for me, amongst all of his books, and I think all of them. I think I have 30 of his or more of his books.
He publishes a lot of books.
You know, The Lamb's Supper, like the way.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
How did I not put that on my list? It's so good.
Yeah, the way that he approached the Book of Revelation, because the Book of Revelation
is hard.
Even there's a couple of things about the Book of Revelation. First of all, obviously, it's crazy symbolic. Lots of symbolism in that book. Yeah. So you have to understand why John was writing that way.
Correct.
Because if you just look at it like, oh, the world's going to end 666, that means this and this and this.
Right.
You know, they wrote movies of the Omen, right? The movies the kid had 666 as a birthmark in his head and stuff like that. I mean, you could take it and sensationalize it.
Yeah, and there was that really popular Protestant series of books.
Left Behind.
Left Behind.
Yeah, Left Behind series about all that kind of stuff. So you can over dramatize a book like that. You know, but what I love is how Scott Hahn really helps us to understand the theology behind it, and it's about the liturgy.
Beautiful.
It's about and his approach was just so
and it's easy to read.
Amazing.
You don't have to have
wonderful.
a degree in theology to read that book. Anybody can read it, right?
Yeah, and that's what I mean, he's got a massive intellect. In fact, I got a chance to sit in on a doctoral symposium with doctoral students that he was doing. And I sat there going, what the heck is going on here right now? I was like, I mean, the guy has a towering intellect, but he's able to take that and get it across in a book.
In a book.
Like
that anybody
The Lamb's
can read.
Supper.
Yeah,
that really helps you understand and really appreciate the depth of the Mass.
Nice.
When you see that really the Book of Revelation is about the Mass.
Amazing. And we will put links up just so everybody knows to all of these books, you know what I mean, so that you can source them for yourself.
Yeah. All
right. So what you got? What's your number? What's your first book on the list?
Other than the Bible, the Catechism, and the Lamb's Supper. Man, that's such a good book. I have probably number one on my list after those is The Fire Within, or just Fire Within. by Thomas
Dubai, yeah.
Or Dubai. Yeah, I don't know how
that's
to say that.
I've never even heard of it.
Oh my gosh, you
you
would love that book.
That's a book for you.
You would
That's
love
a
it.
book. That's a
Fire
book for you.
Within.
Just Fire Within.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and so the subtitle is Saint Teresa of Avila
Avila
and
and
Saint
John
John
of
of
the
the
Cross.
Cross
Oh, yeah,
and the
John of the-
Gospel on
Yep.
Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it basically it
Wow.
takes, I know, yeah. So it
Wow.
takes Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross's like spirituality and their writings, and it really kind of presents this really profound. It was one of the first books I read. Dude, actually, just a few feet away from us in the church, I would sit in adoration and I would read this book, and my heart was just set on fire.
Wow.
The book was called The Fire Within. Like,
Yeah.
thank you. No, but truly, it was just, it's so powerful and beautiful, and I highly encourage you, you
Okay.
specifically and anyone
I
to
will.
read that book. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, Father DeBay is a great author. He wrote a book on beauty too, which is just
It's Father Evan Dubé, correct?
No, Thomas.
No? Thomas DeBay.
by Thomas
Okay.
DeBay, yeah. His
Wow.
book on beauty also is just
Really good.
fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good
really
author to
really good
source.
author, yeah.
I've not read
Yeah.
any of his
So
books.
I
That
actually
is a
read
very
it.
good
I read
book.
it as an ebook back then on my tablet, and I recently, over the pandemic, actually, I bought a physical copy of it to reread it now all these years later, just because it gets me so excited to dive into it again.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. That's good to hear about a book.
Yeah.
So my book, my first book. So, and I have a lot of books like you, Deacon. I probably have 3,000 books or whatever between two bookcases in my house. So I love books. Not all of them are Catholic, but I like segregated them because like my bedroom has all of my Catholic and theology and all of that. And then the other room, there's mostly just fiction and nonfiction, a lot of nonfiction. I'm not big into fiction either. So even though I have a creative mind, I've never been a big fiction reader, except back in the days, of course, when you're reading Danielle Steele and all that other stuff back in the 80s. So that was a different thing. But my favorite, I have this big affection for St. John of the Cross. Like I've talked about it before. He wrecks me. I don't even understand how he did what he did. You know what I mean? And the depth of what, I mean, this is not easy reading. This is not light reading. St. John of the Cross is neither of those two things. But if you are truly seeking to dig really deep into, I would say, Catholic spirituality with grains of stark reality, that's where I would go with St. John of the Cross. He just gets it, and the way he speaks is just beautiful. And there's a book called the Collected Works of St. John of the Cross by De La Cruz, and of course by St. John of the Cross. It's Juan de la Cruz, and it's a huge book. It's like this thick, and it has commentary and a lot of. So it's not just, because a lot of times you open up to read St. John of the Cross, and if you've never read him before, it's a little overwhelming. I mean, it really is. But this book, actually, you can open it up, and there's like commentary and notes, and it's collected work. So there's a lot of information inside of it that kind of softens it and makes it easier to digest. And so even though it's a big book, don't be intimidated by it. It's just a really, really good book. And he gets it. Like he understands. I would say of all of the saints that I have read, and I haven't read all of them, not even close. I mean, that's impossible. I think he gets the dying to self probably better than almost any of them. He gets dying to self. That he gets it. And I think that's why he speaks to me so purely and so clearly, because when I had that experience in that April with the person going to commit suicide, I had to die to self.
Yeah.
I had to like totally just give it away. And St. John of the Cross writes that way. That's how I feel that he writes. He's totally dead to himself, and he's all in for God.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I guess another book for me, Hans Urs von Balthasar's book on prayer.
Who?
That dude is a G.
Yeah.
He is awesome.
Hans
Urs
Urs.
von Balthasar.
Okay.
So it's four
words.
That's some really deep stuff.
He
Though.
beats-
That's that is not easy to read. That is not like, that's super.
But it's on prayer. So what is it? His take on prayer?
Yeah, it's kind of is theology on prayer and spirituality of prayer.
Okay.
Yeah, it just like I said, I like that deeper intellectual stuff.
Yeah, and
So
it is
for me,
that.
that really feeds me. And quite frankly, my preaching was inspired by von Balthasar.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, my people say, "Oh, that homily was so awesome." They're preaching. I said, "Well, you know, I have seek inspiration in preaching too," and he's one of the people that inspired my preaching. As I was studying for the diaconate and first starting to preach, I'd read a lot of von Balthasar, and just working his thinking into my head and looking and approaching the scriptures.
Now,
You
is
know?
he just an author, or what was his story? Like, where?
Yeah, so he was a Jesuit priest.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and
How long ago?
This is in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
Okay, so this
Yeah.
century, last century, 20th century.
Yeah, he died, and he was made a cardinal by John Paul II, but died before he could get the red hat.
Oh,
Yeah, so
but
yeah,
some
died
deep,
in the 80s.
really some deep prayer.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah,
deep writing.
Deep writing. He's got tons of books. I mean, tons and tons of books.
That's amazing.
But his one on prayer, I think, is the one for me is one of my all-time favorites of his, and books on prayer, and one of the best books on prayer that I've read.
Wow.
It's just given me a lot of ways to think about my approach to God and my relationship with God. And that's what a book should do. It should challenge you, but also inspire you to grow deeper in love with Jesus and our
Yeah,
faith.
Agreed 100%. So what's number 2?
I'm going to say Love and Responsibility by then Karol
Great
Wojtyła,
book.
now St. Pope John
Wow.
Paul II. Yeah.
Great.
Another G.
Yeah, yeah.
No, that, I mean, just it to me, getting into that very early on after that initial conversion and like theology of the body
Oh,
was
yeah.
a major impetus for me. And just his whole approach to the human person, the family, sexuality, and just, yeah. I think, was it in that book that he said the greatest gift a man could give to a woman was to for her to orgasm before him or to orgasm simultaneously?
Yeah, that's
It's like, that's the Catholic Church. That, you got a pope saying that kind of stuff, and he
Yeah.
wasn't even a pope then he would become a pope. They weren't like, oh, he can't be, we can't let him in, you know?
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
the Catholic Church. I
That's
love
powerful.
that. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And what's the name of the book again?
Love and Responsibility.
Wow.
Yeah.
The beautiful
yeah,
combination.
again,
Oh,
not
yeah.
not that easy of a read, but just if you take your time, it's just like wine.
Yeah.
It's something you got to savor.
Right.
Don't just rush through it. I
That
got to
is-
read it.
that is
Just
so right.
This
like
isn't
a
Boone's
wine.
Farm. This is not Boone's
just
Farm.
Like wine. Just
Yeah.
sit back and roll your shoulders back and just open that book and just
Get all
enjoy
cozy.
it, you know?
Light a candle.
Hey.
Yeah, light a candle. There you go. Set the mood.
Put on a little classical,
Yeah,
a little
set the
Thai
mood,
coffee, and
yeah.
just kind of like zone into
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or books that I would take the adoration, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
and just really allow God to work
Yeah.
on my heart
Amazing.
through these authors, you know.
Amazing. My next book is a book that actually Deacon suggested that I read, and this was when we were on pilgrimage the very first time. And
Behold the man.
Yeah, no. Yeah, exactly. That was the one. Now, it is St. Mary Magdalene, Prophetess of Eucharistic Love, by Father Davidson. Because I really wanted to know, and he knew I was seeking, and it was the beginning of my journey, and I definitely was a Mary Magdalene. So I wanted to know what was a good book to read about her. And he didn't give me an immediate answer. You know what I mean? It was like he thought about it, and then he came to me and he said, read this one. He said, this is the best book. And so I read it. And it is an absolutely beautiful book written by a priest about Mary Magdalene and her I don't even know if you can, I mean, love, it's almost an agape type love for Jesus and the Eucharist. And that's how the book is portrayed. And you just get to see her not as the prostitute or, whatever the negative stuff is, you know what I mean? You see her as a woman, which we've already determined in other shows is the highest form. God saved the best for last. That's why he made a woman last, because she's the life giver. So it's really interesting to see Mary Magdalene in the eyes of a life giver, even though we, don't think she ever married or had children or whatever. But just because of her truth and her story and her devotion and her love,
Yeah.
she's a life giver, because people find so much solace and so much hope in her transformation. I mean, you got to think about it. When Jesus rose from the dead, who was the first person that got to see him? Mary Magdalene. She didn't even recognize him because he didn't want her to recognize him until it was time. And it wasn't until he said what? He called her name, right? He said, Mary. And she said, teacher, Rabboni. It was just, to me, that's just that, and that's how that book is presented. It's presented in that feel, in that respect, in that it's not about who she was, it's about who she is and who she can help you become. Mm-hmm. That's the power of that book by Father Davidson. It's a great book. Great book.
Wonderful.
Yep.
I think for me, a third book would be Introduction to Catholicism by Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pope Benedict the 16th.
Pope Benedict. It's just, to me, it's just a wonderful introduction to the Catholic faith. That I think that really does a wonderful job marrying the heart and the mind, the intellectual tradition of the faith with the spiritual.
And he generally did that very well, even outside of that book. Yeah. I love that about him, actually.
Yeah, and in fact, I think in a lot of ways he did it better than John Paul II. I don't think it was a prolific writer as John Paul II was, but because obviously his pontificate wasn't as long as John Paul II, but John Paul II had 2 doctoral degrees, and a lot of his writing, like Veritatis Splendor, right, on the moral life of the church, or Fides et Ratio, Faith and Reason, like you got to sit down, like get a headache,
right?
But Ratzinger had a towering intellect, but was able to get it across in a way that immediately just said, I get it.
I get it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful. Honorable mention there, his Jesus of Nazareth books.
The series, the 3, yeah.
So I only read the
stuff.
second one, but I want to start from the top and go back through again.
Yeah, so what Nick is talking about, Pope Benedict wrote 3 books on Jesus' story, the Jesus of Nazareth, and covering different aspects of his life and ministry, and very good. A lot of great exegesis in there.
Oh my gosh,
it was phenomenal connections.
The ways in which he was able to go at length on things. It's like, hasn't this been said before? But no, not the way he did it, and not the way. Like, it's just so powerful. It's amazing that he was able to get 3 books on that topic that way. Yeah,
that's amazing.
But that was an honorable mention. That wasn't one of my picks.
Correct.
But that's another one that I actually
we're gonna have
read
a
here
couple.
in this chapel in adoration.
I'm sure each of us are going to have an honorable mention. So yeah.
Well, speaking of Saint Pope John Paul II, the book titled Saint John Paul the Great: His 5 Loves by Jason Everett is amazing. An incredible biopic on his life, and just really as such a lover and disciple of John Paul II's, to read. Jason did such an incredible job with that book. In fact, my copy of it was a gift from Jason when he came to Awaken Catholic Studios.
Nice.
It was very nice of him, and just phenomenal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Really getting to know this guy that saved my life. John Paul II saved my life, and through the teachings of the theology of the body, and then just learning about his life. But then this book, you just really get to know him, and it's incredible. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah, my third book. Most people don't even know her story, but it's called Song of Silence. It's the story of Jeanne Jugan. She is the foundress of the Little Sisters of the Poor. And it's by Eloy Leclerc, Leclerc. Beautiful, beautiful book about the life of this nun who gave everything and was silenced. And if you're struggling right now with a lot of the silencing that's going on in the church, and a lot of the things are being pushed back against and the cancel of priests, I highly recommend reading this book, The Song of Silence, because even though she was basically silenced and almost ostracized, but they would just, there was a lot of jealousy, a lot of envy, a lot of other things, a lot of human stuff that went on with her. She persevered. You know what I mean? And through prayer and being silent. Actually, the Sisters of the Poor are still very much in this world today. And it was in France. And it's not a very big book. I mean, it's like this, it's not big, but it is beautifully written. And it really helps you learn about patience, understanding persecution, even accepting persecution, so that what you believe in becomes more important than what is how you feel inside. Like your voice becomes a little bit less, and the voice of what God's will is becomes more. And it's just a beautiful book. I highly recommend Song of Silence.
Awesome.
So let me ask you this: do you guys do like the ebooks, electronic books?
I
at
have
all?
to have a book in my hand.
Yeah,
I'm an English major. I just can't read it on a screen.
I prefer physical books.
Yeah, I do too. I don't own one electronic book.
Me neither. I have lots of books though.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a relationship with the book.
Yeah.
Right? You know, like the feel of it in your hand, the paper.
Oh, the smell.
And I have the smell. Right, everything. It engages the senses. You know, you can take your pen and you know you're touching the pages and you're making notes and underlining.
Highlight
and
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a relationship there. I mean, you know, you highlight something that means something to you because that's your copy of the book. So you can highlight to me something. It's just, I just love that relationship.
Yeah. I just pulled a book off my shelf. It's an old book from first edition from 1947, and it's Fatima. But it's so interesting.
Is it Fatima Through Her Eyes? Is it that one?
Yeah, it's
a great book.
And I just started just thumbing through it and reading. I mean, the pages are it's it's really old, but it was really interesting just to find that on my shelf. So, all right, real quick before because we have a few more minutes before we really. Does anybody have any honorable mentions? And I think we're going to do this as a regular feature in our recordings where we're going to talk about either movies, Catholic books, or whatever to give you guys resources of things that we find pleasing because that's a good idea. So, does anybody have any honorable mentions?
Well, I think I want to mention some of the contemporary authors like that people should be aware of. They should be reading, like Brant Petrie.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, dang, man. That
He was the
dude.
one that did the Jewish roots of the Eucharist.
Yes,
right?
he did.
That's incredible stuff.
And Stephen Ray.
Stephen Ray.
Yeah.
So for apologetics and conversion, Stephen Ray to go deeper. Because what Brant Petrie does, he looks at the writings of the Jewish scholars, like in the Talmud and the Talmud is the written tradition, the Mishnah is the oral tradition, and he takes those and he kind of mines those, and makes the connections between. A deeper connection between the Old Testament and the New Testament in our faith.
It's mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
and I love
really
Steve
great.
Ray's. I have kept with me, like verbatim, what do they call it? Photographic memory. Like essentially, even though it was stuff that I heard him say or read, like his explanations of the papacy and like. Going through all of that, like when I'm giving my talks and I'm talking papacy, I'm basically in my head reading a transcript of
Steve
the
Ray.
stuff Steve Ray says because it's incredible. Yeah.
And I think Chris Stefanik deserves a message in here too because a lot of what he's doing, his new one about joy, it's a really, really. My father just loves that book about living joy. And it's just kind of how to live in this world, basically, and live in joy. And it's a beautiful book. And I highly recommend it.
That's awesome.
So,
Yeah, I think anything by the doctors of the church. I mean, you mentioned St. John of the Cross, right? But St. Therese of Lisieux, you know,
Confessions of St. Augustine.
Oh, classic.
Yeah. I was just talking to Ethan during the break before we recorded this episode about Chesterton. He's got some incredible stuff.
Yeah, I remember The Man Who Was Thursday. I read that freshman year in college. Couldn't put it down.
It's the way he writes, you can't put it down.
Like, you know, it was awesome.
Yeah. If you want to dig deep, check out St. Cyril. Just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of his writings because I stumbled into them the other day. What? Like completely relevant today. Written like, I don't know, 1,700 years ago, or even, like a long time ago. And I was like, wow, look at those words. One quick book I'm going to give a little shout out to because I'm still in the midst of reading it is Theology of the Bodies for Beginner by Frank Sheed.
By Frank Sheed? Theology of the Body.
Theology for Beginners.
For beginners.
Oh, okay.
Theology
Not
for
body, not
beginners.
theology, the body
no,
for
no, no.
beginners, Christopher
Theology
West.
for beginning.
Yeah.
For beginners.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Really good, simple
Yeah.
breakdown, extremely easy to read. If you want to kind of dabble in theology and just kind of take a look at it without being completely overwhelmed, Frank Shee does an excellent job.
I still have that on my bookshelf. That was I told
Yep.
you in another episode that my mentor in college, as I was coming back into the faith, first book you had me read was on Platonics,
Right.
So Plato. The second book was Theology for Beginners,
Beginners.
By Frank Shee, and I still have that exact copy, and I love showing it to people that have a question about something.
It's great because it's a very good, easy read.
Absolutely.
And I'd also recommend anything by Venerable Fulton Sheen.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Just go to YouTube or any of those videos and just watch his talks. If you ever don't know what to watch one of his talks. They're like a half an hour long, and you'll learn more. It's amazing what Venerable Fulton Sheen can teach you.
The Four Cardinal Virtues by Joseph Pieper. Incredible book.
Yeah.
Very deep. It's not an easy read, but it is such a solid foundation on understanding the cardinal virtues. That's another one that you just go back to over and over again
Over and over
to
again.
really, it's like every time you read it, you're like, I get this even more now, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's even better. It's
Yeah,
even
yeah.
better. Yeah, no, it's really, really good.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Well, there's a little taste of what we've read and what we think is good for y'all. And like I said, we are going to do this again in the future. We're going to do one about our favorite Catholic movies and stuff like that too. Just so, because there's so much good stuff out there, and a lot of it you don't hear about. So we want to make sure that you know about it. And please feel free to, you can go on the Awaken app, theawakenapp.io, and you can message us and send requests or questions. We are going to put links to that up. And then also go to your Play Store, your Apple Store, or your Google Play Store and download the Awaken app. That way you can get great content, lots of podcasts, music, messaging, and everything else. And then Deacon is going to tell you how you can support us, because this all costs money, and we would love your support as a patron. Plus, if you become a patron, you get special stuff that's only for you, which is really cool. Thank you.
Just go to theprodigallife.com, and on there you will see different ways that you can contribute monthly to the Prodigal Life, and we've aligned them with the different levels of angels. So pick your angel level and contribute to this great endeavor of the Prodigal Life.
God bless.